Hi everyone, and welcome again to my audio-visual channel. I am Gabriela Handal, a draftsman and the host of the show, A Conversation About Art. During each episode, I look for the meaning of art and beauty through conversations with colleagues in different artistic fields. Today, I bring you episode 30, and I will have this conversation with artist Daniel Maidman. If you'd like to support this podcast, liking and sharing this video is a great way to do it, and so is subscribing. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. All right, Daniel Maidman, welcome to my podcast, A Conversation About Art. And also, you are episode 30. So please tell our listeners and viewers who you are and what you do.
I am a painter and a draftsman and a writer. Uh, I uh, I think people mainly know my figurative drawings, which I post to Facebook and Instagram fairly regularly. I also do a lot of painting. I have a novel that should be coming out around the end of the year. And I have done a lot of art criticism over the past 10 or 12 years on my own blog and for various magazines and websites.
Yes, I see. I didn't know about the book, and I didn't know about the art criticism. That's really cool.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are cool things.
yeah, no, I used to write for Huffington. I write for White Hot currently. I haven't written that much in a while because I found that I didn't have that much to say. So I'm a little bit nervous about today because I have not been thinking verbally very much about art. I've been thinking verbally about fiction, but
Huh.
not art. So
Oh, wait, so the novel, oh, right. I mean, you use the word novel. So then this novel is a fiction?
yeah,
It's a story? Oh, that's cool.
yeah,
Interesting. All right. Okay, so all right, so you said that you paint and draw.
yes.
Um, to what degree would you say that you paint, and like what percentage of your practice would you say is painting versus drawing?
Currently, it's probably 95% drawing.
Mhm.
But I've got a solo painting show coming up in either September or October at
Okay.
Dacia Gallery in New York. So
Yes, I
uh,
see.
I've been painting enough to have a show of paintings.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so like
Several
that.
shows of paintings, no?
Oh yeah, I mean, I painted more in the past. Everybody had these sort of like weird personality distortions during lockdown, and mine was
Yeah.
that I just didn't feel like painting for like a year and a half.
Yeah, yeah.
So I didn't. I did like two paintings in 2020 and 2021, I think, maybe
Okay.
three. But in 2022, I've completed like 8 paintings, so I should have a bunch more done for the show.
That's lovely that
Thank
you,
you.
yeah, that's awesome that you're gonna have this show.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so I would like it if you if you talked a bit about your relationship with drawing versus painting.
Hmm.
Why do you think that you draw when you choose to draw, and why do you choose to paint when you paint? You know, what do you think that you can say with one that you can't say with the other one? What do you like about the one? You know, like yes.
Yeah. Okay. So uh, I think I would describe drawing as much more of much more process oriented,
Mm,
both in terms of the drawing, like the actual final content of the drawing, and what it stands for me. Like drawing is a pleasurable practice. I just like drawing.
mm.
I like drawing from life. I like drawing from photographs. I like drawing from imagination. I'm illustrating that book. Um,
Oh.
and those are completely made up. But I enjoy drawing. I'm often listening to something while I'm drawing, like podcasts about history mainly,
Mm.
uh, and um, and so it's an enjoyable practice. With a painting, it's not as much process oriented. Like I'll have an idea for a freestanding aesthetic object that I'd like to complete, and then I'll go and paint it. And I feel like the more formal quality of painting, like people take paintings more seriously than drawings,
Mhm.
and so that provides a kind of a stage setting for a more complete uh, like narrative statement about something
Mhm.
than drawing does.
Okay.
Drawing is just the delight of drawing for me, the figure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's this perception? Because I also have the impression that is the perception of drawing versus painting. Why do you think there's this perception of drawing that it's like some casual type thing versus painting is like more formal, finished, quote unquote, type object of art?
I don't know. I think possibly it's the materials are more involved. They're more mysterious to non-artists. Anyone can imagine picking up a pencil and making a drawing, but a painting done with even without any degree of technical proficiency is in some way looks like magic from the outside. Okay. They tend to be bigger, um, and people see they're generally more colorful, and they're physically more imposing. The materials are thicker, they have more substance, they look more expensive, and in many cases they are more expensive. The materials for painting can have rare materials in them in a way that the materials for drawing tend not to. So people think of drawings as a smaller, more casual, more intimate medium, and paintings as more of a finished artistic statement. And that's my relationship with them. Like I can pick up a pencil and just draw, but I'll tend to think first before I start painting. I know that's not the same for everybody, but that's how it is for me. Yeah.
Okay, so then when you were talking about painting just now, you didn't use the term enjoyment at all.
Oh no, I do. I do, but I don't think. But that's not why I'm there.
Okay.
I'm there because I can do awesome things. I'm not there just to have a good time. Whereas for me, if I'm not making something visual for a sufficient length of time, I get like my fingers get twitchy. So drawing's just like a reflex for me. That's almost purely enjoyable. I don't have any conceptual demands that I place on it. I mean, lately I kind of do more, but through most of my life I just drew, and I don't just paint.
Okay, so then why do you think that in that case lately you've had more of a like a compositional demand or
With
more
drawing?
demand out of drawing? Yeah.
I think it's just because I'm doing so much drawing, I would start to get boring to myself if I didn't. I'm constantly looking for ways to challenge myself. I don't just want to keep on doing the same thing. And I know that from the outside, a lot of my drawings do look like I'm doing something fairly similar, if not the same. But for me, there is a progression of expression and capability.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. That makes sense that from your perspective that it's the drawings are obviously changing into whatever it is, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is your work about?
I don't know. I mean, it has the figure in it. I think it's about I don't know. I mean, I hesitate to. All right, can I give a sort of a provisional answer?
Sure.
That's not meant to eliminate other lines of inquiry.
Of course.
Because
no commitment.
It feels reductive because if it could be said in words, you wouldn't need to make a picture. But I find the living human body both as a machine capable of applying coordinated force and as the vessel of the human presence very moving, elegant, beautiful, and expressive, and endlessly various. And so I think there's a song of praise for that.
Okay. Well, I understand you not wanting to pigeonhole yourself in a way into one subject matter, but I feel like the subject of the human, just human in general, the human figure, is so broad and has so many facets that it's like almost impossible, because like in a way, even if you're placing figures in a landscape or in a geometrical or whatever it is, it's like that is still about the figure in a way, and so in landscape in a way is still about the figure, because that's where we live and it's our environment and that kind of stuff. So it's like I feel like there's still plenty of stuff, but I totally understand not wanting to kind of belong to any kind of team, quote unquote, in any way at all. I totally get it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on the side of auto dicks, you know. I have a
Uh-huh.
different vision of what human beings are like. Uh,
I'm
I
pretty ignorant about art, so I would like it if you told me about this Otto Dix thing. I know that
I
he's a painter, but
Yeah, it's an early 20th century, very harsh, distorted, ugly figures. Like
mhm,
it, and it's not, you know, one of these circumstances where like, oh, you're saying ugly because you haven't looked. He tried to make his figures ugly because
deliberately.
he what deliberately, because he
Mhm.
had a dark outlook on human nature, and he was
Okay.
expressing that sense of humanity through his figures. They're very troubling figures, and I do not have such an outlook on human nature. I think
Mm.
that human beings are capable of tremendous things, and
Yeah.
that they were made beautiful and are beautiful, and so that's what I see, and so people tend to come out beautiful in my work, um, like that. So I guess I am on a side, but it's a very broad side.
Okay. Okay. So then, if your figures come out beautiful, does that mean that you're doing any kind of deliberate idealization of your
I'm not.
reference?
I'm not, and you know, you become aware of when you're doing that.
Mm.
Beyond a certain basic level of technical capability, you recognize what you're doing, and I don't do that. It's just how I see.
Mm.
So there certainly is some degree of stylization, but there's also that stylization occurs in the process of seeing, and then not necessarily in the process of rendering. Like I get some complaints from people that I only draw beautiful people, and I'm like, look, if you looked at the people I look at, you would not think they were all beautiful because you don't see everyone beautiful
Mm.
the way I do. So that's what I mean. It's the filter occurs before consciousness.
Mm. Okay. And what is the filter that you're talking about?
This sort of like beauty bias, and you know, if you sit down and look, you'll see figures of all sorts of shapes and sizes.
Mhm.
um they just I'm told, and I think myself, that they look beautiful, just
Mhm.
because I think that people look beautiful. So
Do you have any kind of a conscious, um, I'm not sure how to ask the question, but what I want to ask you is basically how do you think you choose your references? And I ask because I don't know how I choose my references. I don't think I choose them
uh-huh,
necessarily. Like when I see pictures or whatever, and I'm like, I want to draw that. I can't tell you necessarily why I like them. I mean, sometimes I can. It's like, oh,
uh-huh,
I like the neck. I guess it's long and
uh-huh,
it looks cool.
right.
But other than that,
It's
you know,
Mila
there
Jovovich.
it's yeah, and sometimes it's Mila Jovovich, and that's enough.
Uh-huh,
But in other occasions, I've seen other individuals that are perfectly attractive, that I think they're perfectly good looking people and all that stuff, and they post pictures, and I have zero interest in drawing them. And
uh-huh,
it's kind of comical because once or twice, one of those good looking people were like they were like insinuating that they were offended that I didn't draw them,
uh-huh,
that I wasn't inspired by their pictures or whatever. And it's like,
right.
I don't know why sometimes I want to draw something versus sometimes I just don't feel like it. So this is a long, convoluted way of asking you if you know why you choose your references,
I
I
do, but
guess.
it's not all one reason. There are lots of different reasons.
Yeah.
So among them, uh first and foremost, people that I know and like. That's a huge big deal, because I'm
Okay.
drawing a person. I tend to favor dancers, because I like the dynamic sense that, and like poses that they can do,
Mm.
and that they can use their body as a creative instrument.
Mm.
Um, I tend to like, if I'm working from a photograph, I like photographs that create a lighting or compositional situation that's a challenge,
Okay.
that I haven't done before. But I mean, it can't be a challenge for challenge's sake. It has to be something that works. So I
Right.
sometimes think of myself as like more of a photo editor at this point, because like all this drawing from photographs didn't really exist before lockdown
Yeah. Yeah.
and Instagram. But we're all, I think this is probably true for you as well. We're meeting models over Instagram, and a lot of models are working for photographers, and then that filters over to drawing and painting people. So there's this sort of three-way collaboration between model, photographer, and artist. Um, and so so the work of the photographer is tremendously important as well. If they have an interesting eye, an interesting sense of when to snap a picture, an interesting sense of lighting and composition, that produces something that for me, it would be rewarding to spend some hours studying and learning from. And that I think I could rephrase sufficiently to make a drawing that's distinct from the photograph, even though it owes itself to the photograph. So that I have something to contribute to that conversation as well. And yeah, I guess those are the biggies. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like this whole thing about the relationship between photography and art, because as you probably know, when photography came out, it was like, oh my god, art is going to be obsolete and stuff. And I mean, effectively, portrait painting, like by commission or whatever, might not be as pervasive as it used to be, in the past or whatever. But art has not become obsolete. It's still, we're all still here.
Right.
And I feel like I like the relationship aspect that you're talking about, because that's exactly what's been happening the whole time. It's like they're informing each other. Yeah. And they each still do things that the other one cannot do,
Right.
Okay, so do you think that because of what you're saying just now about how you feel like there's a collaboration between you, the model, and the photographer, do you think that at some point you would participate in taking the photographs yourself?
I mean, I do shoot reference and draw from it sometimes, but I'm not a very good photographer. And it's not that interesting to me. Oh no, I mean, I have a pretty good camera. It's like some kind of prosumer model that my mom had and wasn't using, so she gave it to me. And I tend to shoot reference with traveling models, because this is just the economics of art modeling. Models get paid a lot more for photography than they do for life drawing.
Really?
And most of what I do is life drawing, and they're willing to work with me at the lower rate, but I know that when they're traveling, their expenses are very high and their time is valuable. So I'll always offer to shoot reference at something approaching reference rates for like half an hour. And then I'll tend to draw a few things from that later on. I mean, it's mostly done to get their rate up. And so that's how I wound up doing some photography. But I don't really enjoy it all that much. I'm not great at it. And there are really great photographers out there. And I've talked with Patty Watwood about this because there's this sort of like, I get emotional and moral hurdle of drawing from other people's photography. And once I reframed the problem for myself as no longer just me and the model working together, but as me and the model and the photographer working together, it became it made much more sense to be able to work from photographs that I hadn't taken. So I felt that I had more of a moral or aesthetic right to ask for permission to do that once I recognized the role of the photographer. Yeah,
that aspect of that relationship is also interesting, because I mean, I personally have not had an issue just using photographic reference, as long as I make it a point to credit the photographer, whoever it is. I mean, that and that is if I can find out, because it's like sometimes there's this picture of Michael Fassbender that to this day I do not know who took the picture. And I think the last time, the reverse search in Google, that is a good tool to figure out who a picture was taken by. And it's like the last time, because I've tried more than once to find out who the picture was taken by, and the last time, like the related search or whatever, it was like haircuts for redheaded men or something. It was like that was the possible similar pictures, and it's like that's not helpful, Google, but whatever. It was comical. But yeah, for me, as long as the person that's using the photograph not taken by them or whatever, as long as proper credit is given, I think that's really good.
And we have I think we have somewhat different sort of like ranges of pictures that we're looking at, because you're often working with from photo like without communication with the model or photographer, because your people are like famous people, and I'm I actually won't draw a photograph unless I can get specific permission
Mm,
from the model and photographer.
mm,
So my people are not famous people, but I'm in touch with them all, and I can
mm,
credit them directly.
mm.
And if it sells, I send them a percentage of it.
I see.
So it's like that.
Yeah, there's a it's funny because I mentioned something of the sort in the previous episode. It's like that is a whole ass other subject
Uh-huh.
of conversation, and some other person might have to make an entire podcast about it because I feel like that is
Hmm.
a whole field of discussion
Uh-huh.
with lots of views on the thing, you know, like whether you give your references a percentage or not,
Uh-huh.
and whether, you know, some people, you know, I don't know, it's like there's lots of views of that, and I think it's interesting. It reminds me of also the argument of artists that don't want to charge for their work,
Hmm.
for example. It's like that seems interesting also to me, and I haven't heard an argument that I could side with so far on that. You know, it's
Uh-huh.
interesting. It's like lots of views on stuff that people just like debate about,
I know
ongoing
if you
debates. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like I know a few artists who don't who refuse to charge for their work, and they have legitimate reasons in their lives to not do to not, the role that art has for them is not the same as the role that art has, for instance, for me, where that's a significant portion of my income.
Mhm.
And so and this is off topic, but my wife makes soap, and
Okay.
she was selling it at little craft fairs in Brooklyn,
Mm.
and she had like some interest from people in starting a soap company because they really liked her soap.
Mhm.
And she thought it over and she was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make more money from my soap. I'm making soap because I like to make soap. This is fundamentally not a business.
Mm.
And I think that that exists for some artists as well. And that's legitimate, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, she's like, the joy would go out of it if I were charging at a soap company.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think in a way, or at least that makes me think of, or reminds me of, afterwards. Like, you know, say for example that you then start making, like, you know, say, even in the case of an artist, like, you know, a visual artist, a drawer, a painter, or whatever, that they become famous or they become recognized, quote unquote, by a specific imagery that they made, and then they're kind of tied to that, where now they're obligated to keep making that same kind of imagery because that's what was selling.
Yeah.
So I feel like not wanting to be pressured by that,
Hmm.
if the person became famous, I think then it would make sense. Like if you're somebody that makes stuff and you want to run away from that kind of pressure, then that would make some sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to do whatever you need to do to preserve the fundamental state of playfulness
Yeah,
that keeps art alive.
yeah, yeah. Or rather like the sense that keeps the work that one makes as genuine, in the sense that you're making it because you want to make it, not because it's going to sell or
Right.
because it's popular or whatever. Because
Hmm.
um, yeah, I think I've definitely missed out on lots of things because I just want to draw whatever I want to draw.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I kind of refuse. I mean, it might be a little bit irrational or whatever, but I kind of refuse to commit to certain
Hmm.
things because I don't want to have my drawing polluted by that idea of, oh, this is going to sell or whatever. And
I
besides,
think that's
already,
very.
yeah.
I think that's admirable. So yeah.
Okay. Well, Mr. Maidman, thank you for indulging on the questions, prying
Hmm.
questions about your work.
No problem.
What is art in your opinion?
Okay. Um, I'm going to give a more theologically oriented answer than I would
Yeah.
have a few years ago, probably. But if you consider the universe as having emerged from an act of creation, so from nothing, there came into being everything that is around us. Um, and if you consider us as recapitulating in a tiny and imperfect way uh, the divine hand that made the universe, I think our impulse towards art recapitulates the act of creation, and the things that we make from that impulse toward creation are the art. I used to define art entirely in terms of what it itself was, but when I was thinking about this podcast, I found myself thinking in these terms, in terms of what the maker of art is doing. I think that impulse to make the universe leads to art. And I think as a figurative representational artist, it's quite easy to come up with a lot of like hard and fast rules for what art is that leave out a lot of things that people call art. And that seemed incomplete to me. I think my current idea is overly broad because it depends on self-reporting of the authenticity of an impulse, which can't be verified. And I do think that some kind of external objective criterion is desirable. I don't know if it's possible, but it's certainly much broader, and it allows many more artifacts in to the conversation. So that's where I would be on it right now, like a demiurge kind of a thing.
Okay, so why do you think that this theological divine type string or idea came into art recently?
Into my thoughts on art, or into art in general?
Into your thoughts about art, yes.
I suppose my whole life is an evolving conversation with myself about philosophy and the nature of things. And I stopped being such a doctrinal atheist a while back. And I'm more flexible now about what I don't know.
Okay, okay. That sounds good. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, so then in that case, before, when you didn't have the divine, the or just any theological aspect in your idea of art, in your own definition of art, then what was called art was more limited. And so now that the divine has been added, you said it's more broad, like more things are quote unquote allowed as art.
Yeah, because if art reflects an impulse towards creation, then what defines it is the impulse and not what is made. And so any sort of a thing could wind up as art. I haven't really thought consciously about this in a while. This is one of those things where you reflect on something and you find that your opinion has changed. So I am partway through a process, and I'll check in with myself in a few years and see what I think. I mean, my earlier ideas about what art was that were much more formal definition of art, and those are still pretty good, but I think that they miss some important things, so they're no longer sufficient for me.
Okay, so then what is something that you now kind of, or at least for now, in the present, that you accept as a work of art that you didn't before?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, for me, I think I spent a lot of time thinking about Cy Twombly.
Yeah.
He's this abstract scribbly guy. I've written about him, and have you got a buzzing over there?
It's some kind of construction sound.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A mystery New York sound.
I thought it was maybe a problem on the line.
No.
But
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I've written about Cy Twombly because I saw a really interesting show of his work, I think at Aiken McLean or something a few years ago. And I was troubled because it was so intensely chaotic and so it was almost impossible to decipher anything in particular from it. And yet there was something there. There was an aesthetic, like a complex and sophisticated aesthetic impulse, even though it led nowhere that I could sympathize with. And so he's sort of like one of my measures for how tolerant I am. And I still recoil from thinking about Cy Twombly. And there are people like who I find even like outside of any sphere, like I cannot stand not Distill, Clifford Still. The one with the jagged shapes and colors. There's like a lot of guys that and some of them I think are fakes. I think they fail my current definition of art in the sense that there is no authentic impulse. I think it's very attractive to be an artist,
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of institutional corruption in what gets counted as significant art. And so there's a lot of art out there that is fake. It's formally fake under my old, more strict definition, and it's spiritually fake from my current perspective. But again, my ultimate desire would be to have some criterion where I could sit down and write out a justification, and any reasonable minded person could say, okay, well, that makes sense. That's fair. And I can't do that. So it's an incomplete project. And I'm more open to having failed to define art than I used to be. But I still think that one should strive to identify what art is. But I mean, you know, a lot we're going to eventually have to decide how much credit for seriousness we give the 20th century. Because if you ask that question of someone in 1898, it wouldn't be a problem. You know,
Right.
and from the beginning of humanity through 1898, there were worlds of variation in art. But all of it was relatively easy to group as art and to distinguish from things that were not art. And I think, and then you have all these problems in the 20th century where they really blast the territory much wider, to the point where we have these hilarious things with janitors sweeping art out of museums and so on. And I think we will sit down one day and say which parts of the 20th century were sincere and insincere, and separately from that, which parts should we dismiss and not dismiss. And we're going to be able to sweep away a lot of clutter and a lot of things that are impeding our ability to communicate with ourselves and each other. Because, you know, it's like, you know, there were critiques of mathematics and of philosophy in the late 19th and early 20th centuries that made it formally almost impossible to make progress or definitive progress in math or philosophy. And nonetheless, we need math and philosophy.
Yeah.
So we have to decide what our relationship is going to be with these intellectual trends. And the same thing with art. We will have a form of spiritual starvation without art, which means that we are constrained from taking seriously certain arguments about the outer limits of art that contaminate the inner core of art. Because if we accept this, then the legitimacy of that is undermined. And that we cannot live without. So whether or not even it's true, we're going to have to put this aside. So that's, I mean, this is a very complicated project, which I haven't given much thought to. But I think that that's the problem that we're going to be sorting through for the next century. One of them anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I really like the aspect of sincerity as part of the procedure of making art and choosing what the artist decides to see through as an artistic object of art.
Right.
And I also think that's a really good filter to kind of like what you were saying just now of to use it as a filter to determine whether effectively something is art or not. Because I also, I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons for which I started the podcast was because I'm trying to kind of like change my idea and my relationship. I'm trying to change my idea of art and change my relationship with it. Because, you know, before it was full of this postmodernist sarcasm of like, oh, anything can be art.
Right.
But then at the same time, it felt and still feels weird to have my drawings have to be shoulder to shoulder, like in a gallery or whatever, with something that I consider a joke.
Right.
That gets to parade around with the name calling itself art. And it's like, you know, like, so I'm much more comfortable now being like, that is for sure not art. And I can't exactly tell why it's not art, but it's not art. And I don't think it deserves to be showing with my work.
I think that there's a lot of value to be had in recovering our animal instinct for what art is. I think that we have, you know, we're encouraged to set aside our instincts on a lot of things, often to our detriment. And I think that we all have an instinct for what art is and isn't, and that we could all stand to trust it a little bit more
Yeah.
and say, no, this is not art.
Yeah.
This is a put on,
Yeah.
and or a tax dodge, but it's not art.
It's money laundering. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so in that case, what do you think is the purpose of art?
I think the purpose of art, I mean, it's not one thing, right?
Right, sure.
When you asked me what my art is about, I was like, it's a celebration of this facet of the human experience. I think um, its purpose is to give us a path towards transcendence of, I think that by nature, or we are tend to get locked into our circumstance, which involves privation, pain, loss, and death.
Mm-hmm.
And those have been dominant strains in the human experience throughout history. Mm-hmm. But it has always been possible to imagine our way out of it and to see ourselves not merely as animals that suffer, and to become masters of our suffering by comprehending it and by considering other ways that the world could be and the best ways that the world is. And I think that art summarizes and communicates that escape from a cruel universe, from between people.
Okay. Okay, so then the path towards transcendence that you mentioned at the beginning, mm-hmm. So it's transcending
our circumstances.
Okay, so yeah, so like then trying to see beyond them, or remember that there is other stuff other than that, that mm-hmm. other things are better, things are possible, likely,
or even different future. Things that that it allows us to become the masters of our circumstance and to define ourselves outside of our circumstance. So there's a lot to be said. There are many good things about life. It's not just a litany of woe.
Of course.
Yeah, but I think that to become fully human, which is to say to have a mind that is free, you have to have a certain detachment from your circumstance that allows you to conceive of other things and to look at your own life in a critical way without fear. And I think that art helps teach us how to do that. I mean, apart from, there's all this, a whole body of thought regarding art as providing a moral education, mm-hmm. Indoctrinating us in the virtues. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a lot to that. But I think that the deep virtues of art are more metaphysical than just, the golden rule. They have to do with the nature of being, the nature of mind, the nature of liberty. And I think I forget where we started though, so I'm just babbling. Go on. Sorry, go on.
No worries at all. I kind of also oh, we were talking about the purpose of art.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Liberation.
Okay. Yeah, actually, this last bit just now reminded me a little bit of Stoic philosophy, mm-hmm. which is effectively detaching yourself of yes. Emotions and just whatever suffering you think you are mm-hmm. going through, mm-hmm. And just be looking at those things in a sort of, maybe rational or maybe dispassionate, whatever term mm-hmm. you want to use, in order to then kind of like solve the issue or like go after what you actually want your life to be, or this kind of stuff. Or
and to distinguish that which you own. I mean, I really like Epictetus mm-hmm. and his idea of recognizing in a very radical way what is yours and what is not, mm-hmm. and of detaching detaching your sense of necessity from the things that you can't control, mm-hmm. because they're not yours.
Yes.
And his extremely broad definition of what's not yours.
Yeah, most things are not
yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Maidman, now, what is beauty in your opinion?
God, this is really difficult. Um,
Yes.
yeah. Uh, I think I'm not I think that it's a very complex concept and a word that doesn't mean something specific, but there is certainly a pyramid of qualities that you could build up that would lead you into the territory of beauty. So, for instance, uh, when I'm saying that a figure is beautiful, there are several different ways that I can talk about it. You can talk about like formal qualities, youth, athleticism, proportion, grace that people think of when they're like, oh, that's beautiful.
Mhm.
I think that those are fairly superficial qualities.
Mhm.
There's a parallel beauty of rendering in art where, the line has a grace to it, and the rendering of forms is subtle and fluid, and you have a sense of the reality of the thing, and no part sticks out as wrong, and no part is out of proportion or misdrawn. um and then you look at like late Michelangelo drawings, and there's almost nothing there, but they're
Mhm.
among his most beautiful drawings. And it's because he's gone past the formal beauty of muscle and bone and dynamic posing that define his earlier drawings, and he has reached a sort of an inward spiritual truth that flays the outward qualities. So there are these very indistinct and simple drawings of Christ that are out of proportion and poorly defined and indecisive, but they're so profound, and we have a deeper experience of ourselves and of our communing with Michelangelo and with the divine through those drawings than we do from his earlier drawings, which are dazzling and in a different but I think less mature way.
Mm.
On top of that, there's the difference between things that work and things that don't work. And I think that that's like completely unpredictable and maybe even indefinable. So you could do like 100 drawings, and 50 of them could have this sort of like formal beauty, and 50 of them could have the spiritual beauty, but there would be one where you're like, oh my God, that's totally just right.
Mhm.
And you don't know it's happened until you're partway through it. There, you can't anticipate nailing it like that. Um, and you can't even necessarily explain it after it's
Mm.
happened. And that's also, I think, that's when you have transcended, I think, your ego and have become a vessel for something powerful that transmits itself into the world through you, which I think is the true form of inspiration. Uh, but and so there's it's almost like a separate meditative practice that leads to that sort of experience, and only in the context of that sort of experience does something that works happen, I think. But on the other hand, I mean, I'm gonna say that I was wrong saying that just now, because sometimes you're like tootling along,
Yeah.
uh, lost in your own personal issues and ego, and then you look down and you're like, holy crap, I nailed it. Like, this is it. Um, but these things just pop up, and I think they're like dreams. They're unique and specific, and they have no history and no evolution. You don't know where they came from, and you don't know where they're going. You're just lucky that they interacted with your hand.
Mm.
And so that's another facet of beauty that I think is probably its most powerful manifestation. And then there are these descriptions of beauty where you talk about the experience of the viewer in confrontation with beauty, that they have an experience both of adoration and of terror. And I
Uh-huh.
think that that's important too. I think that beauty should be so scalding that it takes you apart in a way. Uh, it's an intense phenomenon. Um, and so you can approach beauty from not from the perspective of trying to create it in your work, but from the perspective of somebody experiencing it as a form of shock that detaches you from your assumptions about the limits of things, and puts you into terrifying divine territory that's bigger than yourself. And I've seen people undergo this. I had the horrible bad luck that a friend of mine who never understood art had this experience looking at a Renoir. And I was like, oh my God, it had to be Renoir. And he was just standing there for hours and he was like, I understand art now. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's all right. But that was where he had that revelation. And it is a form of revelation. And that form of that revelation comes about as a response to beauty. And the beauty in question has to interlock perfectly with your spiritual state at the moment of the encounter. So there are lots of things to say about beauty, but I don't know that I can sit down and tell you the last word about it. So
Well, I mean, you're not obligated to tell me the definitive thoughts on beauty or anything. It's I what I want to know is, what you think about it. And you obviously have lots of experience with
mhm.
all the writing and reading that you do on the subject. um what um why do you think there's that terror? Why,
uh,
or why did you use that term specifically?
Terror.
Being scared, yeah.
I read it once a long time ago, and it always stuck with me. That like ecstasy and terror are characteristic of our encounter with true beauty, which is like a divine fire. Um, and I think it's because uh, uh, your encounter with beauty, like if you consider yourself as a closed object, then if you encounter beauty, it violently uh, opens you. Like it breaches your boundaries, which means that the encounter with beauty is similar to the encounter with death.
Mhm.
And it's scary.
Yeah.
Uh, it's overpowering, and you come into confrontation with fundamental forces of the universe, which you in your limited human form are not designed to withstand. The revelation of beauty is transitory, because if we lived in the territory of beauty all the time, we wouldn't be able to survive it, because it's greater than we are.
It's too much.
Yeah. And so I think that when we're surprised by beauty, uh, we sense ourselves also in the terrain of annihilation, which is frightening.
Mm.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just that aspect of the what you were the some of the descriptive words that you were using, like terror and shock, and this part,
Mhm.
and these things as part of beauty, make me think effectively of like the Dadaists and Duchamp making ugly things, and like the urinal and this kind of stuff. And I feel like I'm not saying that those things are beautiful,
Mhm. Mhm.
but what I'm saying is that it's actually a lazy kind of oversimplification of something that is really not just about shocking,
Mhm.
with a urinal like that. So it
Uh,
just makes me think that, they really misunderstood their search for beauty, or what they thought
Maybe.
beauty was, because it's like, I feel like it's, we tend, our body tends to go for the path of least resistance,
Mhm.
and going for that shock
Mhm.
with the urinal and that kind of work, I feel like is going for the path of least resistance, because it's easier to shock that way than
Mhm.
to shock via a painting by Renoir.
Mhm.
That is more difficult. It took more work. Like, you had to paint each thingy, and you had
Mhm.
to think about the composition, and like all the
Mhm.
thoughts and stuff. So
I mean,
it seems interesting.
I think 100 years later, it's the urinal looks easier than it was, and it's certainly easy to execute, but I think it's not easy to think up. I do think it's an evil thought,
Mm.
but I never really considered uh, beauty in the context of Dada before, so I don't have like a whole essay in my head on the subject. I've given some thought to Dada and particularly the Surrealists, but not in a long time. Um, there's a lot of things that I think that they did were bad, and a lot of things that I think they did which were almost by accident good.
Mm.
Like they made some beautiful work.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
sure,
they
of
were still
course.
artists, even though they were, assholes. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, they're like the stuff they were doing, regardless of the intention, definitely fits into your more recent idea of art,
Hmm.
because it's broader in the
Hmm.
sense that it kind of more permissive, sort of.
Hmm.
Um, so some of that stuff would probably, like be allowed in there in a way. Okay, so um, what role in that case would you say beauty plays in your work? Does it have a role at all?
I I don't know. I mean, I my encounter with beauty in my work tends to be at that more childish level of formal beauty.
Mm-hmm.
I am reaching towards more sophisticated forms of beauty, but also I'm not sure how much an artist can seek to make beautiful work. Like because beauty uh relies on the encounter, beauty at least for human beings, I think emerges from the experience and not from the making. So I can look at my work afterwards and say, "Oh, this one's beautiful,"
Okay.
or hopefully, somebody looking at some work or other, it will catch them on the right day, and they'll have some kind of a profound experience from it. Um, but when I'm sitting down and saying I am going to make a drawing or I'm going to make a painting, I
Mm-hmm.
can't say I'm going to make a beautiful drawing or a beautiful painting. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just making a drawing or a painting. So I can immerse myself as a thinker and as a viewer of art in experiences of beauty, and that will inform what I do. But it's not something that at the moment of application is relevant or possible.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Maidman, we have reached the 51-minute mark
Wow.
of this conversation, and that's cool because it does not feel like 50 minutes.
Hmm.
Um, it feels much shorter than that, but I don't want to take over your entire day or anything. So, okay. So then I think this is a good place to end
Okay.
the episode. So Daniel, you talked a little bit about the stuff you're working on at the beginning, but please tell our viewers and listeners again what you're up to lately and where your work where your work can be found.
Okay. So my drawings can be found on Instagram at Daniel Maidman. There's a second one for my quicker line drawings. It's at Daniel Maidman _ line drawings. Um, I tend to show with Dacia Gallery in New York. So my painting show is going to be there probably in September or October.
Okay.
And where else? There there's a gallery in Norway, I think, that's going to start showing some of my drawings.
Uh-huh.
But
Lovely.
I need to send them some, and I tend to pop up in group shows here and there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and the novel will be coming out from Griffith Moon towards the end of the year, and I have a book of drawings and a book of art criticism from them. The art criticism is a long conversation with the painter Vincent Desiderio, which I thought was good enough to write down and publish.
Oh,
And
yeah, I'll bet.
so it's mostly him, and it's wonderful. And the book of drawings I'm very proud of. It's from like drawings from 2014 to 2016. We're going to do another book of drawings soon, and I have a limited edition book of drawings coming out from Archive, which is the Quiet Lunch publishing arm. And I think that sums up most of where I am lately, like that.
All
So
right. Well,
yeah,
that sounds awesome because I admire how productive you are,
thank you.
and I want to say impetuous, but I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate. It just, like you you're always putting out stuff and making stuff, and I just think that's really inspiring and cool. And also, I remember one time, I think it was in Facebook. I don't remember what I mean. It's a pic. It was a picture of like your submittable
Oh
a
yeah,
profile where you
uh-huh.
posted a bunch of declined.
Oh yeah, they're all like it's all
things.
declines. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like, because um, I guess people will post, or we often post about the things we got into, which is not that many compared to the things that we applied for.
Yes.
And it's just, we forget that we have to apply to uncountable amounts of things to get a few of them, and it's like,
Yeah.
that's just a really good reminder.
I feel like things like it looks like things are going well with me most of the time, and so I want to like make it clear that I fail quite as much as I succeed, and probably more, and it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's just that it's just that even then, with all the declined applications, or whatever, it's like you still have a book coming out.
Mhm.
You're still gonna have a solo show, and you have a fiction novel coming out.
Mhm.
I just That's very inspiring, and it's such a good example
Oh well, thank you
for,
very much.
yeah, for all, like, established and emerging artists, I think.
Hmm.
So
Well, yeah, it is always a pleasure catching up with you, Gabriela.
yeah, actually, this conversation, and if I don't know, if some other time you have the time, I would like to just pick your brain further about stuff, and like
Absolutely.
probably with more questions about the stuff you talked about here. So okay, well, thank you, Daniel, for joining me, for your time, your words, and your thoughts. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Feel free to let Daniel and I know what you think of this conversation in the comment section. Also, I invite you to subscribe to my audiovisual channel because more of these conversations are coming. I also invite you to like this video and share it with any and all pertinent individuals. If you want to support Daniel, myself, this podcast, or all three, all the links will be in the video description. And see you next time. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Bye.
Thank you, Gabriela.